I looked up from the contract I was studying when she walked into my office. As a gentleman, I, of course, greeted her warmly. "What the hell do you want? I am pregnant. And what? And what are we going to do about it?" "What do you mean, we? You're pregnant, not me. You are the father. And now I have to take your word for it. Do not make me laugh. You're the only one who did this without protection, so it's definitely you." "I don't believe it. Protection does not provide a 100% guarantee. It says on the packaging that they are not completely effective. Besides, you weren't in a position to notice if I was using anything. I asked the others who were there, and they said you were the only one who didn't use protection." "Certainly. It's as if they admit they didn't use it to be accused of being the father. You were so drunk or on something that you probably didn't even remember your own name. I remember more than you think. I also remember that what you did was essentially without my consent. I remember telling you that you couldn't do this without protection." "Seriously, Tony, if you really thought this was non-consensual, you would have called the police a long time ago. And I wasn't the only one doing this. The fact that you did this in front of me means that you were too out of your mind to think clearly. This does not change the fact that you are the father of the child I am carrying. We have a dead end. You say I'm a father, I say I'm not. Of course, I will believe in what I think is right. I will give you one thing. When you give birth, I will take a DNA test. Now please leave my office so I can get back to work." She stood there looking at me, and my mind went back in time. My relationship, or lack thereof, with Antonia Marie Byans began in 7th grade. Our town had 4 elementary schools that taught kindergarten through 5th grade, 3 middle schools that taught 6th through 9th grade, and 1 high school. Tony and I met on the first day of high school, and that meeting set the tone for our future relationship. I had just gotten off the school bus and was heading towards the entrance when a limousine pulled up to the curb and an incredibly beautiful girl stepped out. I was past the stage where I thought girls were you and smiled to myself, thinking, I know who I want to be friends with first here. She must have thought she was late because she was almost running when she came to where I was standing watching her. Apart from being in a hurry, she was not paying attention to her surroundings and bumped into me. She growled, yes, she growled. "Watch where you're going, dumbass." Of course, I behaved like a gentleman. "Go to hell, bitch," I said and headed into the building. She hurried after me and, having caught up, grabbed my hand and stopped me. "What did you call me? Are you also stupid?" She must have misunderstood me, and, snatching her hand away, she entered the building. This short episode had lasting consequences for me. Tony was the daughter of the richest man in town and seemed to think she was better than everyone else. She appointed herself queen. The boys were fascinated by her and wanted to be her boyfriends, and the girls wanted to be like her, so they crowded around, probably hoping that some of her magic would rub off on them. I didn't have those feelings for her at all. Our short first meeting showed me what kind of person she was, and I never forgot it. Of course, she also never forgot our first meeting, and I ended up on her blacklist forever. She made sure that her circle, which made up almost 2/3 of our class, knew this and knew that she would not be pleased if any of them had anything to do with me. I found that I was isolated from many things because of the way she treated me. This naturally reinforced my opinion of her. She was just a spoiled brat. By 8th grade, I was old enough to want to date, but all the girls I wanted to ask out were part of Tony's circle and didn't want anything to do with me. And Tony was happy about it. She liked to rub my nose. "I heard Sandy turned you down. Maybe you should do something about your breathing, or maybe it's your body odor. What do you think?" Luckily, there was one aspect in which she had no power. Sport. I participated in all team sports, basketball, football, and baseball, and I was pretty good at all of them, if I may say so myself. Even though I was good, I never dated a cheerleader because guess what, they were all part of Tony's circle. The situation improved when I entered high school. Kids from the other 2 high schools were there too, and they didn't know Tony. Of course, she tried to reappoint herself as queen, but she couldn't because the other 2 schools had their own cliques and circles, and Tony was a stranger to them. I met new kids, made new friends, and finally found girls to date. This didn't mean my relationship with Tony faded into the background. She still tried to pester me every chance she got, and I think my complete disregard for her and everything she did was the best way to repay her. What helped me was that I constantly managed to make her angry without even intending to. We both ran for class president, and I beat her by 2-1. Her boyfriend was the team captain, and I was the receiver. She kept him under her control and persuaded him not to pass the ball to me. Even if I was completely free, he still didn't throw the ball to me. We lost 2 games that we should have won easily because of this, and a couple of the team members who knew what was going on told the coach, and he benched Ryan. The coach told Ryan that the only way he could get back into the game was if something happened to Donnie, who was a substitute, and Mark, who was third. This made Ryan so angry that he left Tony, and she, of course, blamed me for the breakup. I just continued to ignore her. When it was time for the junior prom, she lobbied hard to become prom queen, but didn't even make it into the royal court. Meanwhile, although I was not a king, I was a member of the royal court. This happened again at the senior prom. She did not become queen or member of the court, but I became king of the ball. I heard her rumored to claim that I bribed a lot of people to get votes. It was an outright lie, although I may have done it 3 times. I never tried to make Tony angry on purpose, but fate saw this as its mission. For example, after basketball practice, when I walked out into the student parking lot, it was raining, and I noticed that Tony was having trouble with his car. The headlights alternated between dimming and brightening, and it was obvious that her battery did not have enough charge to start the car. I didn't like her, but I wasn't a complete asshole, so I started my car, drove up and parked in front of her car. I got out, went to her window, and told her to open the hood, and I would help start the car using my wires. Fuck off, fool. I don't need your help. I got back into the car and drove away. I later heard that AAA arrived 3 hours later. I also heard her telling everyone that she asked me for help, and I just laughed and drove away. It didn't help her reputation when one of my teammates said he saw everything and that she was lying. Graduation passed, and I thought Tony would be a thing of the past. I stayed in town and went to a local college, and she went east to some prestigious women's college. I had a good 4 years in college. My major was business management, and I did well with a 3.84 GPA. Unlike in high school, where I played 3 sports, in college I could only play 1 due to the course load. I was good enough at football to be drafted in the 6th round, but I had no interest in playing professional football. As graduation time approached, I started sending out resumes and received several responses. I interviewed with 4 companies, got offers from 3, and ended up choosing Zix because it was a local company and I didn't have to move, which was good because I was pretty happy with where I was living. I had a lot of friends, and although I didn't have a steady girlfriend, I went on dates often and had sex often enough to be happy. I had a lot of girlfriends, but nothing long-term worked out for one reason or another. To be honest, most often the girls left me for someone else. I never understood why. We got along great for 4 or 5 months, and then one day they told me they didn't want to see me anymore. Since I've never really worried about breakups, it was probably a good sign that it wasn't going to be a long-term relationship. Of my high school and college classmates, 2 girls worked at Zix, Audrey and Carol, and I dated both of them during college, but there was no spark between us. We remained friends, and with Audrey, even friends with benefits, and sometimes I was asked to be an accompaniment to an event or social event. I had been working at Zix for a little over 7 months when it was time for the company Christmas party. I wasn't dating anyone at the time, and neither was Audrey, so she asked me to be her escort. We were sitting at a table with several colleagues when she walked in on the arm of an older man. Audrey was sitting opposite me and, seeing the look of disgust on my face, asked, "What happened, Jake? I thought I got rid of that bitch after finishing school." She looked where I was looking and said, "You better hope she doesn't notice you and doesn't know you work here." I looked at her in bewilderment, and she, catching this glance, said, "You did not know. What didn't you know?" That Tony's father is the president and CEO of Zix. I had no idea. He's with her, and we watched as Tony and her father took their places at the head table. Luckily, we're lost in the crowd, so maybe you'll be lucky and she won't see you. I shrugged and said, even if she notices me, it won't matter. She doesn't work here, otherwise I would have seen her already. She must be working at one of the other factories, so she won't be able to do anything to me. Would you like to? She is preparing to take over when her father retires. The whole corporation, Jake. This means you will work for her. You better hope she doesn't notice you. It's too late for that, I said, seeing Tony say something to his father, and then get up from the table and walk straight towards us. She came to the table and said, Audrey, it's so nice to see you, but I'm a little surprised. Thought you had better taste when it came to the opposite sex. Before I could say anything, Audrey said, I brought my fiancé so he could meet my colleagues. As for my taste in men, it is excellent. There's a lot more to Jake than you might think, as you might have found out for yourself if you weren't so dismissive of him at school. Of course, Tony said. It's good to see you again, Audrey, and returned to her table. What is this story with the groom? I asked. I'm trying to make her understand that you are here as my companion and not as an employee. I bet if she thought you worked at Zix, she would find a way to spite you. You're probably 100% right. I hope this is exactly the idea she came up with. Apparently that was the case because I managed to work for the next 3 years without hearing anything from Tony. It helped that I no longer went to another company Christmas party or picnic. In fact, I avoided any corporate events in case I ran into Tony again. Then I got lucky or unlucky depending on how you look at it, and was promoted to production manager, and the outgoing manager and my coworkers threw a cocktail party to celebrate my promotion and his retirement. A small corporate event, just our divisional party. An hour into the event, we were graced by the presence of Charles Wellington Byans, the company's president and CEO, and his personal assistant, who always followed him, and I'm sure you already guessed that this was the very person preparing to take his place when he retires. An event that I sincerely hoped would not wait until my retirement. Dave, the outgoing manager, brought Mr. Byans to me and introduced us, and then introduced me to Tony, who said in a cold tone, I already know Mr. Preston. Dave turned to me with a questioning look, and I said, Miss Byans and I went to the same school. I caught the look on Mr. Byans's face when he heard my name, Tony's tone, and my response to Dave's look. Tony's tone and my Miss Byans and I went to the same school, instead of something like, Tony and I were classmates apparently registered with him, he said. I enjoy personally welcoming my new managers to the team and look forward to getting to know you better. I am delighted to have received this opportunity and look forward to being part of your management team. The look Tony gave me clearly screamed, you won't be here long if I want you to. Dave took Mr. Byans and his assistant to meet other people, while I mentally began to write out my resume. To my surprise, nothing bad happened. 4 months have passed, and it's time for the office Christmas party. I thought about skipping it like the previous 3, but decided that since Tony already knew I worked here, it didn't matter if I went. I came alone since I wasn't dating anyone at the time, but there were a lot of people I worked with at the table with me, including Audrey and Carol. The only difference from the last Christmas party I went to with Audrey was that this time Audrey was with her husband. After dinner and speeches, the dance routine began and the dance floor was filled with couples. I danced with Audrey, Carol, and a couple of other women I knew, but couldn't get into the holiday spirit. Perhaps this was due to the fact that I saw all the happy couples and was without a couple myself. I didn't know, but I didn't want my mood to affect others and ruin their evening. After 3 hours, I decided to go home. On the way out, Rick Smith, a guy I worked with and was friends with, stopped me and said, I have something you just have to see. It's something wild and it will blow your mind. The party was held downtown at the Hilton Hotel, and Rick led me to the elevators and pressed the button. We got into the elevator, and he pressed the button for the 4th floor. In room 406, he knocked twice, waited 2 seconds, and then knocked again. The door opened and Rick led me into the room. Rick was right. It blew my mind. There on the bed was Antonia Marie Byans, and she was with 3 men. Tony and I never got along, and I didn't have any kind thoughts about her, but I can't say I never wanted to have sex with her. She was a bitch, but one hell of a sexy bitch, and that was considering what she was wearing. She was simply magnificent. I took out my phone, but Rick grabbed my hand. No photographs. We all agreed that there would be no photographs. I put the phone in my pocket. I smiled to myself, thinking I had a new way to piss her off. If I could have sex with her without letting her know it was me, and then let her see me when it was over, I was sure it would turn her off. And I could do it. She was looking the other way and didn't see me enter. I was right? Rick asked. It's something wild, isn't it? I was too busy undressing to answer him. I turned to Rick, who was still dressed, and asked him if he was going to join, and he said no. I've already done this twice, and I need to go and get my girlfriend. Good luck. Have fun, and left. I did this, but she didn't even realize it was me. For the first time, I thought maybe she was too drunk or high on illegal substances to realize what was happening. Could one of the guys in the room have given her something? I saw her eyes open wide when she recognized me, and that showed me that she wasn't as mad as I thought. I cleaned myself up in the bathroom and got dressed. When I got to the door, I quickly took out my phone and took a photo of her having sex with 2 guys looking at me. I blew her a kiss, then walked out the door and headed home. The camera wasn't on, so the photo didn't work, but Tony didn't know that. She thought I made her and would constantly worry about what I could do with her or who I could show her to, and that was enough for me. When I got back to work, I expected Tony to come and try to get me to delete the photo, but he never came. Up to this day. When I asked her to leave the office, she did not leave. She just stood there and looked at me. After a few very long moments, she asked, "Do you like your job, salary, and benefits?" I knew what she was getting at, so I cut her off mid-sentence. Not enough to stand you. She looked at me with a look I couldn't decipher, then turned and walked away. After she left, I couldn't help but wonder if the child was really mine, and this, of course, was accompanied by the thought that if the child was mine, it would greatly ruin my life. I pushed those thoughts aside and went back to studying the contract when Tony first entered the room. I did not expect this when, a week after Tony's visit, Charles Wellington Byans walked into my office and sat down in the chair opposite my desk. Before I could say, "Good morning, Mr. Byans," he said, "I'm sure you can guess why I'm here." I was almost sure, but I said, "I have no idea, sir." The look he gave me said, "You're a bad liar." And then he said, "My daughter told me about her pregnancy and claims that you are the father. I'm sure she's wrong." "How can you be sure?" I really didn't care about Tony, but even I wasn't such an asshole to tell her dad why I didn't believe I was guilty, so I said, "I admit that I had sexual relations with her, but it happened in a rather unique situation. A situation that calls into question her assertion. If you want to know more, you need to ask your daughter." "I'll do that," he said and stood up, leaving my office. As soon as the door closed behind him, I was already mentally compiling my resume. Not surprisingly, on Thursday, 2 days later, I was called into Mr. Burns's office. I had no idea what to expect, but the possibility that I would leave his office with no job left me. He asked me to sit down and looked at me in silence for a while, then said, "I talked with Antonia for a long time, and she confessed to me what happened. Knowing this, I can understand your reluctance to take responsibility, but my daughter is sure that you are the father of the child, and I believe that she is right." I was about to stand up and say, "Fuck you, old man," and leave, but he seemed to sense it or guess my intentions and said, "Wait a second before you get mad at me. You are a smart person, and I am sure you understand my reasoning. Let's think together. My daughter is spoiled, and yes, it's my fault. My wife had complications with Antonia's birth that prevented her from conceiving again. Knowing that Antonia would be our only child, we treated her like a treasure. Long story short, she became my little princess, so yes, I spoiled her. If she wanted something and I could give it to her, I did it. As with any treasure, you try to protect it. Because of my position and wealth, there was always the possibility that someone or a group of someone would try to take advantage of my daughter. You've never seen them because they're very good at what they do, but the fact is that Antonia has always been protected. You might be surprised that I even know the first words you ever said to my daughter. Does the phrase, "Go to hell, bitch," remind you of anything? That's how close her defense was. I am fully aware of what your relationship with my daughter was like. You have no idea how many times Antonia walked through the house cursing at you for this or that. That's why I think she's right when she says you're the father of her child. Think about it, Jacob. Would someone who hates you so much want you in their life? Would someone who knows how you feel about them want to do business with you? For me, the answer is not just no, but damn no. What goes on in the minds of women remains a mystery to me, but something in Antonia's head tells her that you are the father of her child, and given the circumstances, if Antonia says you are the father, I believe her. So the question arises, what to do about it? I don't want my daughter to be an unwed mother. Among other things, it will ruin my reputation, but this is only a minor consequence. I don't want my grandson to be born a bastard. He looked at me, waiting for me to say something, and I said, I understand your logic and how you came to think that she was right in pointing at me. But that doesn't mean I agree with it. There were 7 other men in that room when I got there, and at least one that I know of has already left. I have no idea how many others may have been there before I arrived or appeared after I left, so there are at least 8 more possible fathers. If I was sure that the child was mine, I would do the right thing, but any one of those 8 could be the father. Add to that the fact that one of the 8 was black and one was Hispanic. You and Tony will convince me to take responsibility, and the child will turn out to be black or Hispanic. What will this look like for me? As for a fool or a cuckold, I don't need this any more than you need a stain on your reputation. And I have a question. What happened to Tony's defense? How did she end up in that room? They were there, but they shouldn't have interfered in her life. Just protect her from being kidnapped. They knew where she was and kept all possible exits under control so that no one could drag her out of the building against her will. He looked at me silently again and then said, "What needs to be done for you to accept responsibility?" Sorry. Simple, Jacob. How long does it take for you to take responsibility? How much do you have? His face lit up with a smile as if he had found a way out, and I smiled because he thought he could bribe me. He then asked what amount I meant, and I said, "No, sir. It's your game, so you decide the amount." "Okay. How about 100,000 for marrying Antonia and 100,000 for every year you stay married?" "Not enough." "How much then? How much do you have?" "This doesn't lead anywhere." "Because you don't understand. You don't have enough. No matter the amount, it won't be big enough. Why would I, or any sane person, marry a woman who doesn't love him? Do you want me to enter into a loveless marriage so that there is no stain on your reputation? It will not happen. It just won't happen. No, Jacob, you don't understand. I'm not talking about marriage forever. I'm talking about a marriage that will last at least a year after the baby is born. After that, a quiet divorce. Do you like your job? I love my job, but not enough to marry Tony just to keep it. That's not what I was talking about. How about this? You agree, marry Antonia, and I will give you 100,000. On your wedding day, I will give you another 100,000. You will remain married for a year after the birth of the child, and on the child's first birthday, I will give you 250,000. Your wedding gift from me will be a house of your choice in your name only, so you can keep it after you divorce Antonia. A prenuptial agreement will be signed, according to which you will keep the house and all your money. Plus, you'll have a guaranteed lifetime job at Zix with guaranteed promotions and raises. You could very well be a vice president by the time you're 35. Will you formalize all this into a legally binding document? Yes, I will do it. How will Tony feel about this? She will agree. Don't forget that she came to you expecting you to marry her and legitimize the child. There is still one small problem and one big one. If I marry Tony, I doubt that we will have a happy and fulfilling union. I doubt I can go without sex for a year and a half or so. The prenuptial agreement should allow me to have a secret sex life outside of marriage without being punished for it. And finally, I still don't believe that I am the father of the child. I remember that there was one black and one Hispanic in that room, and I don't know if there might have been an Asian who left before I arrived or showed up after I left. If the child turns out to be someone other than a white Caucasian, I can leave and still get the $250,000 I would have gotten if I had stayed the whole year. I find this acceptable. I'll arrange everything. Now we just need to get Tony's consent. She has already agreed. How is this possible? I myself didn't know that I would agree until I said it. Barnes pointed to the intercom on his desk and said, "It had been on since you walked into the room, and she was sitting in the conference room listening. If something was said that she didn't agree with, she would say so. Is everything okay, Antonia?" "Yes, Dad. Now all we have to do is plan the wedding, and I'll contact your mother right away." I already called her. He turned off the intercom and said, "I have to admit, I'm curious. Why, given your feelings for Antonia, did you even have sexual relations with her? She didn't see me come into the room, and I knew that if I could have sex with her without letting her know it was me, and then let her see me, it would really piss her off. Understand, the conference room is the third door to the right as you exit my office. Perhaps now is the time to talk to your fiancé." I got up to leave, and he said, "Welcome to the family, Jacob." I said a little sarcastically, "I'm glad to become part of the family, Dad," and left the office. I walked into the conference room and found Tony sitting at the table with a cup of coffee in front of her. I sat down opposite her and asked, "Why? Why? Why do you want to burden yourself with me? I'm sure anyone who was there that night would happily agree to the deal your father offered me. Why not one of them? You must have had feelings for whoever brought you to that room. Why not him? Why you? It's simple. I know, and don't ask me how, but I just know that you are a father, and I want my child to know his father, his biological father, and not just someone he can call daddy while growing up. As for feelings for anyone in that room, they simply weren't there. I found out after it was all over that one of them had put something in my drink. I was drunk, and the combination of alcohol and illegal substances meant that I didn't realize what I was doing until it all started, and then I just got involved. I really got into it, as you probably saw. By the time you showed up, I was almost sober. I don't regret it. This will be one of my best memories. It's not something I'd ever want to do again, but I'm glad I experienced it once. This leads to what you told your father about getting sex outside of marriage. You won't have to if I have anything to say about it. What you saw in that hotel room is the real me. I love sex and want everything you can give. This marriage for me will not be just a marriage of convenience. Do you agree? I'll do my part. When it comes to sex, you don't have to love someone to sleep with them. You don't even have to like it. We proved it in that hotel room. She looked at me for a long time, then said, "Yes, we proved it, didn't we? So now, as soon as I heard that you agreed to Dad's proposal, I called my mother, and she's already on the case. Expect a wedding before I start showing. In about 2 months or so, we need to start dating to show that we are a couple. For what? Everyone will understand that we got married because you got pregnant. Dad made it clear to you that he doesn't want a stain on his reputation. We must create the appearance of good relations. I'm sure you understand that he expects good behavior from you, considering what he offered you for accepting me. I have to admit that she is right about this, and if she's serious about her sexual desires, it won't be difficult for me to follow the program. Okay, but I'll leave it to you. There's a charity ball on Saturday night. Dad's on the committee, and I'm expected to go. This could be our first date. The ball will take place in the ballroom of the Hilton Hotel in the city center. I've already booked a room for the night because I don't drive when I drink, and I always drink at these events. Do you know where I live? Pick me up at 6. As I walked back to my office, I thought about what I had just agreed to. Then I thought about what I would get for this and smiled. On Saturday at 6, I rang the doorbell at Tony's apartment. When she opened the door, I was very excited. I always knew Tony was a sexy bitch, but I never saw her like that. A little black dress, 4-inch heels, and a simple pearl necklace around her neck. She didn't wear much makeup, but what little she had was perfect. At that moment, all I wanted to do was skip the charity ball and go straight to her bedroom and spend the night having sex with her. She saw the expression on my face and the lust in my eyes and smiled. "Calm down, boy. You will get yours, but not now." On the way to the Hilton, I didn't say much, but Tony talked nonstop. "It won't be as bad as you think. I fully intend to be the best wife you could ever ask for. I'll admit the circumstances are a little unique, but I'll do my best to make sure you don't regret marrying me. I will try my best to make sure you don't take the easy way out that Dad offered you at the end of your baby's first year. I want my child's father to be with him or her all the time. I know you don't believe you are the father, but I know you are the father, and I will have proof when the baby is born. When we wake up tomorrow, I'd like to start looking for a house. I know Dad said the house is your choice, but I will live there with you and I have a few wishes. An in-ground pool so I could swim and would love a jacuzzi. A real fireplace rather than one of those gas ones would be nice, and a fairly large deck for outdoor entertaining in good weather. I think 4 bedrooms will be just right. One for guests and one for each child. Do you already know that you are having twins? No, but I want more than one. I want to have them close in time, but we can decide that later. I just shrugged and let her continue rambling on about what she wanted the house to look like, how she wanted the kids' rooms to be decorated, how she wanted the furniture to look, and so on and so forth. To be honest, I wanted about the same thing as her in terms of a house, but what hurt me was that she believed that we would be together forever. Surprisingly, we got along great. It seemed that she was sure that we would be together forever. I didn't have such thoughts. I still didn't believe the baby was mine, and even though we got along well, it wasn't good enough for me to stay beyond the agreed-upon date. Everything depended on the DNA test. If the child is not mine, I will fulfill my obligation and stay for a year. There are DNA tests that can be done before the baby is born, but I didn't want to do them. It would be bad enough to stay a year after the baby was born knowing it wasn't mine, so I didn't want to add another 7 months to that. The wedding took place, and we honeymooned on St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands for 2 weeks. By the time we got home, I was seriously considering telling Tony to go to a couple of group sex events to take the pressure off me. She wasn't lying when she said she would accept whatever I had to give. There were nights when I pushed her away, completely exhausted. This despite the fact that I always believed that I could never get enough of sex. Tony brought a few more surprises with her. She turned out to be a better cook than my mother, and that says a lot. She was also fanatically neat and kept the house immaculately clean. There was light and joy in our home, but at work it was a completely different story. Tony's father has set a date for his retirement and has already chosen his successor. He will leave the company in 2 years. Tony was no longer his personal assistant. She was now executive vice president, which would be her title until her father left and she took his place. Although I was her husband, she did not give me any concessions. When production dropped, she called me into her office and gave me a dressing down. I pointed out that production had dropped because one of the machines had broken down and the manufacturer did not have the required spare part in stock. She said, "These are just excuses. You're the boss, so solve the problem." I was so angry at her attitude that I didn't tell her that I had already solved the problem. I called several companies that used the same machines and found one that had the required part in stock. I made the purchase arrangements, and the part was scheduled to arrive by FedEx the next morning. I also called the manufacturer, found out which parts broken most often, and ordered them so that we would have a reserve in case of future failures. I left her office, and at the end of the workday, I was still so angry that I left work early. I went to Bud's bar and sat down to have a beer and think. It was damn unfair. The machine broke down and the spare part was unavailable from the manufacturer. No other part from another machine would fit. But I didn't let that stop me. I solved the problem. But Tony didn't ask what I was going to do. She just gave me a dressing down. I was on my second beer when my phone rang. A quick glance at the screen showed that it was Tony calling. I turned off the phone and smiled. I already knew what the conversation would be about. We went to work together. I would drop her off at the main office and drive to the plant, and at the end of the day I would pick her up and we would drive home. She was waiting for her ride, so I knew what I needed to do. I ordered another beer. It was 10 o'clock in the evening when I returned home and the house was dark. I doubted she was even home. I saw her purse on the kitchen table when I turned on the light, so I knew she was home. She was probably already asleep. She really was in bed because when I tried to enter the bedroom, the door was locked. In any other case, I would have simply shrugged and gone to one of the other bedrooms. It was a four-room house. But I was still angry with her, and 8 beers didn't improve my judgment. I didn't knock or persuade her to open the door. I just kicked the door hard in the door handle area and it opened. Tony was in bed and probably asleep, but the noise from the door woke her up. She wasn't fully awake when I took her out to one of the other bedrooms, opened the door, and pushed her inside. Don't forget who owns this house, bitch, and I won't stand for being locked in my house. I returned to our bedroom, undressed, and went to bed. I was a little surprised that she didn't follow me and start cursing. I think I surprised her. She never saw this side of me. I think she thought I was so henpecked that I'd just go into the spare room and we'd talk in the morning. In the morning, when I woke up, Tony was no longer there. I was a little angry with myself when I saw the door. Last night, I was too angry to think about having to repair the damage myself. The spare part for the machine arrived at 9:15, and by 10:30 we had the machine running. I didn't hear from Tony during the day, and at the end of the day, I stopped by Home Depot to get everything I needed to repair the door. Luckily, the door itself was not damaged, and I only had to replace the door frame. When I got home, Tony was there cooking dinner. Although we had a dining room, when it was just the two of us, we usually ate in the kitchen. When I walked in, she took a beer out of the refrigerator, opened it, and put it on the table for me. She opened a bottle of Merlot for herself, and half a glass was already on the table. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. Do you want to talk about yesterday? What to talk about? About your attitude, for example. You knew when you entered into this marriage that I would become your boss. I wouldn't be a good boss if I cut you some slack just because you're my husband. I don't expect any favors, but I do expect a little basic politeness. If you treat all your employees the way you treated me yesterday, then you will have a lot of good people leaving the company. Your problem is that you've been Miss Arrogance for so long that you never learned how to treat people. Instead of attacking me as soon as I walked into your office, you could have said something like, "Jake, your department's performance is down. What's going on?" Then I could tell you why, tell you that I found the problem and have already taken steps to solve it. But that's not how you acted, right? Sorry, but I'm still learning how to be a boss. I'm worried that everyone will think that I only became vice president because my dad owns the company and I really don't know anything. I think I go overboard sometimes to show that I'm in charge and getting the job done. Why didn't you pick me up after work? Because I didn't want to be near you. The mood I was in when I left your office was still there at the end of the working day. If I were in the car with you on the way home, I'm afraid things would be said that would have far-reaching consequences. I thought it was best for everyone to stay away from you until I calmed down. She nodded as if she understood, and then stood up and began serving up dinner. At dinner, I told her what I had done about the machine and that it was already working. She changed the subject to a charity auction we were going to on Friday and then asked if we could go dancing after the auction, and I agreed. When dinner was over, she said that dessert would be served in the bedroom. I wanted to say, maybe later, but first I need to fix the door, but I resisted. We were alone in the house, so who cares if the door didn't close? She almost left me without the strength to get out of bed in the morning. The next couple of months went quite smoothly, and Tony was already showing, and I'm sure many were mentally counting, but if they did, they didn't say it out loud. There are women who look even sexier when they're pregnant, and Tony was one of them. She went from hot to super hot. When we participated in social events or just went out to dinner, the lust was visible on the faces and in the eyes of the other men in the room. Pregnancy also mixed up her hormones, and she seemed to want even more sex than before. More than once I wondered if it would be physically easier for me if she snuck away to a couple of group sex events. And then I found out that she was indeed slipping away. I doubt it was for group sex, but she did sneak out and have sex. I don't know about other men, but I could tell when I had sex with Tony that I wasn't the first one that day. I felt the difference. It may seem far-fetched, but when you have sex with your partner 4 to 5 days a week, usually 2 to 3 times at a time, you start to feel her. There was no doubt, that Monday night that she had had sex with someone else during the day, and it had happened in the last 5 or 6 hours, and that meant that her lover worked in the same building as her. How did I calculate this? I drove her to work and picked her up from work, so they either had to do it at work or they went somewhere in his car and came back. In addition to this, the 5 guys who attended her group sex worked at the head office. People she already knew. Did it make me angry that she was cheating? Hell yes. But was I going to do anything about it? Of course not. The deal I made with her father kept me in place. I already received a house and 2 payments of $100,000. I made the deal with serious doubts that the baby was mine, so I didn't expect to stay with Tony after the baby's first birthday. It was a deal. I had to stay married to Tony for 1 year after the baby was born. She was 2 months away from giving birth, so I had to wait another 14 months, and I would get another $250,000. Can I tolerate a cheating wife for $17,857.14 a month? Of course I can. Plus, if the baby turns out to be non-white Caucasian, I can leave immediately after the baby is born and still get $250,000. Tony didn't know, but she had made a big mistake. If the child were white Caucasian, I would not do a DNA test. I loved being married to Tony, and if the baby had been white, I would have stayed after the baby's first birthday. But now everything has changed. I'll do my time and then leave. And if feeling wasn't enough, the change in our routine was obvious. Once or twice a week, she drove herself to work. There were problems at work, and she needed to work late. She didn't want me to sit and wait for her. She was always in a good mood when she came home and always felt like it was our second or third time. This continued until her 7th month and then stopped. No more commuting to work and no more second or third time feelings. Tony became more affectionate and even a little clingy. The doctor told her to abstain from sex when she entered her 8th month, and the lack of sex was driving her crazy. Even though she couldn't have sex, she said there was no reason why I should suffer, so every night before I went to bed, she made me feel good. A week before her water is due, I took her to the hospital, and 6 hours later Tony gave birth to a 7-pound, 600-year-old girl whom we named Regina Marie after Tony's mother and mine. I didn't see any resemblance to me or anyone in my family, so I was pretty sure she wasn't mine. Now I'm faced with the problem of what to do after my child's first birthday. It was clear that I would divorce Tony, but would I be able to continue working for the company she headed? I knew I could work with her as long as she treated me like any other employee, but could she? I doubted it could. I believed that after the divorce she would do everything possible to either kick me out or fire me. So should I wait until I get fired or start looking for a new job? My deal with her father didn't say I had to stay with the company for a year after the baby's first birthday, only that I had to stay married to Tony. Leaving now seemed like the best decision. If I wait until I get fired, it will likely be under circumstances that I won't get a good recommendation from Zix when looking for a job. Now was the right moment. Tony would be on maternity leave for the next 2 months, and her father was still at the helm. I knew he would be unhappy with me leaving, but he knew the circumstances, and I think he would give me a good recommendation if necessary. Tanya's parents arrived while she was in the delivery room, and we sat and chatted until we were invited to see the baby. They were touched, and then after a short visit with Tony in the intensive care unit, her father returned to work. Regina and I left the room so Tony could rest, and she invited me to have coffee in the hospital cafeteria. We sat down with drinks, and she asked what my plans were. I didn't see the point in hiding, so I told everything. Isn't this too hasty? I do not think so. I see it as leaving at the right time. If I wait, I have no doubt that Tony will make everyone think I've left under a cloud, and that will definitely hurt my chances of finding a good job. What does it take for you to stay? Why are you asking this? You know I made a deal with your husband. You were a good influence on my daughter. She's matured since you showed up, at least in my eyes. I'm afraid of what might happen if you leave. I know you think it's a marriage of convenience, but for Tony, it's more than that. The girl fell in love with you. You may not see it, but I see it. I thought she was crazy, but I didn't say so. Returning to the question, what does it take for you to stay? I smiled as I thought of a way to end this conversation. Not much is needed. I've been in love with you for a long time. How about we meet at least once a week and have sex? I'm serious, Jake. What do you need? I'm serious too. Once or twice a week and I'll stay. That won't happen, Jake. I didn't expect it to be, but I needed a way to show you that I wouldn't stay. No chance at all. There are some other things you don't know that make my departure inevitable. Can you really leave your child? She's not mine. She's not like me or anyone in my family. I looked at my watch and said, I need to go back to work. I got up and left. Before returning to the factory, I stopped by the head office to talk to my father-in-law. I got straight to the point. I need clarity about our agreement. Should I wait until my child's first birthday to file for divorce, or can I file before the divorce is not final until the first birthday? You can't be serious. Certainly can. You always knew that I never believed that the child was mine. But you and Antonia got along great. Everyone sees this. So what if you don't believe you're Regina's father? You can't be sure unless you take a DNA test, so why not leave it as is? Are you still following her? No, I stopped it when you got married. Why? If you were still following her, you'd know why I'm leaving when my year is over. She's cheating on me, and I can't have a cheating wife in my life. I do not believe in that. Antonia would never do something like that. Do you have proof? Nothing that would meet the standards of evidence in court, but I'm happy with what I have. To answer your original question, you can't file until Regina's first birthday, but the deal was made to avoid a tarnish on our reputation. Divorce due to infidelity will definitely leave a stain. It won't be because of treason. I use irreconcilable differences as the reason. One more thing, I won't be able to work here under Tony after the divorce. I know her too well to know that she will do everything in her power to either kick me out or fire me. I need to start looking for a new job. What I want to know is, will I get a good recommendation from you when I start receiving calls asking for recommendations? Nonsense, Jacob. I told you that one of the benefits of marrying my daughter would be a guaranteed job for life. It was from you. Once you leave, I highly doubt Tony will honor this agreement. What if I make it so she can't ignore it? How can you do this? I will sign a contract with you. I'll structure it so that if Antonia tries to fire you, she'll have to pay the remainder of the contract. How will it work? Tell me how long you plan to work before retirement. I plan to work for 30 years. You've already been with us for 6 years, right? A little over 5. We will conclude a contract for 25 years. It will say that if you are fired for any reason, the company will be required to pay the remaining years of your contract at your highest rate of pay. It will also say that even if you are demoted or transferred, your pay rate cannot be reduced. If she eliminates your position, she will be required to find you another position within the company. Say, if she moves you from a manager to a janitor, she will still be required to pay you as a manager. Are you really going to do this? I'll do it. Why? Why what? Why are you doing this? Why are you suggesting this? Because I saw you together. I know that you both have strong feelings for each other. The problem is that you are both too stubborn. Even if you leave her, it will keep you close, and I believe that as long as I can do that, you two will end up together. and I need you to stay close so that my granddaughter can have a father. I don't know. You always knew that I didn't believe that she was mine. Do you know this for sure? No. Then everything is possible. In the end, I accepted his offer. The way I looked at it was, we fought all the time in school, so what difference does it make now? I spent a few hours at work, then drove back to the hospital for visiting hours. When I arrived, Tony was feeding Regina, Tony's parents, and my mother had already given her the nickname Reggie, and I watched and had general conversations. When Tony finished feeding, she said, "Come here and take her in your arms. It's time for you to hold your daughter." This was not the right time or place for the conversation I was about to have with her, so I walked over and picked up the baby. I don't know how cold or stubborn you are, but when an innocent face looks at you and makes those baby sounds, it melts your heart. I smiled at her and admitted to myself that maybe she could be mine. Then I noticed that her tiny hand had grabbed one of my fingers and wouldn't let go. Although I wasn't sure I recognized her, it seemed like she recognized me. The nurse came and took the baby into the nursery, and when they left, Tony began to say what I knew she would say. "She looks like you. We truly made a beautiful child. The next one will be a boy, I'm sure." I said I would see her the next day when she was discharged and left. The next day, I picked her up at 10 in the morning, and the car was quiet for the first 5 minutes, and then Tony asked, "What's wrong with you, honey? You look depressed. What did you expect? You knew all along that I didn't believe the child was mine. Now she's here, and despite what you said yesterday, she doesn't look like me or anyone in my family." "Nonsense. I see you in her, even if you can't. A DNA test will prove this." "I don't think I'll do a DNA test." "Why not? You want proof, don't you? It's easier for me to believe that she's not mine. This will make it easier to care for." "Care? God, Jake, why can't you understand that you belong here with us?" "That's the problem, Tony. 3 months ago, I was getting happy with what we had and almost decided that if the baby was white Caucasian, I would skip the DNA test and stay past the baby's first birthday. But then you ruined everything." "I? What did I do to change everything?" "You cheated on me with other men." "Changed it." "Yes, Tony, I did. It's called cheating when you sleep with other men behind your husband's back." She fell silent and didn't say a word. When we arrived home, her mother was already waiting to help her and the baby get settled. I went back to work and finished the day. When I returned home, Regina was still there and had prepared dinner for us. She gave me a mother and baby to-do list, then said she needed to get back to her husband. I walked her to the door, and she stood on her tiptoes and kissed me. "Take care of my girls, okay?" "Okay, I'll do it for you." She looked at me with bewilderment and said, "Do it for yourself, Jake," and she left. Dinner was quiet. The child was sleeping until I got up and started clearing the table and washing the dishes. Tony was sitting at the table, and as I leaned over the sink, I heard her say, "I did this for us." I turned to her in bewilderment and said, "What? I did this for us. I didn't consider it cheating. I did it because I love you and didn't want to lose you." I almost laughed, but controlled myself. "This is what I need to hear. Are you sleeping with someone else because you love me?" "This is true. I fell in love with you, and I didn't want to lose you. I always knew you were Reggie's father. I can't explain it, but I know. When we got married, it was because I wanted Reggie's father in her life. But by the time my 4th month arrived, I fell in love with you. Around the 6th month, I started thinking, what if I was wrong? If the baby were white, I knew I could keep you with me. I would give you the kind of sex life that only an idiot could refuse. But what if the child was mixed race? I knew you would walk out the door no matter how good the sex was. There were 3 blacks and 2 Hispanics at that party. What if one of them was the father? For my own peace of mind, I had to make sure that you were Reggie's father. I found 5 and had sex with them, and then using their samples, I did a fetal DNA test and was able to eliminate them. Once that was done, I focused on making sure you never wanted to leave me. I didn't think it was cheating, Jake. I just wanted to make sure I didn't lose you. I never thought that you would know about this. I tried not to give you any clue as to what I was doing. How do you know? I had a feeling. That's all? Did you accuse me of fraud because you had a hunch? Back off, Tony. It goes both ways. Round trip. What the hell does this mean? Did you just know that I was the father of the child? Well, I just knew that you had sex with someone other than me in the 7th month. That's it, Tony. I just knew. She was silent, and I went back to washing the dishes. I was drying the last of them when she asked, "What are you going to do?" "I'll do my year, and then I'll leave." Could you just walk away from your child? I know you're mad at me, but Reggie, you know, I don't believe that she's mine. But she's yours, Jake. Do you really think that I went out of my way to test these guys and didn't test you at the same time? You're Reggie's father, Jake. You don't believe me, then do your own test, but you are her father. At this point, the baby began to fuss, and Tony stood up and walked towards her. 5 minutes later, I walked into the living room to find Tony sitting on the couch cooing to the baby while he breastfed her. It was a sight that tugged at the heartstrings. Tony was still looking after the baby when I went to bed, but I was still awake when she got into bed. "I'll leave you, Jake. I have a year of work, and by the end of this year, you won't even think about leaving. The doctor said it will be 6 weeks before we can make love again, but you won't go without sex." How did it happen? Call me weak, call me stupid, but I believed her story that she strayed just to see us end up together. Almost 3 years have passed, and we are still together. We get along great. Tony tries his best to corrupt me, and Reggie holds my heart in a grip that cannot be broken. I took my own DNA test, and Reggie is indeed mine. Will Tony ever get lost again? Honestly, I do not know. I think she might have been on a business trip in Boston, but I have to admit that I have no evidence that she might have been, just a guess. Not even a feeling, just a thought. But I have to be honest with myself. I know there's a thought lurking in my head, once a cheater, always a cheater, so I'll always wonder if she does it or not. Human nature of people, everyone has it, and it's not going anywhere. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.